can you see now that my intrusive thoughts were so extreme and so vile almost? Can you understand why people don't open up?
You sat down with Ollie going, guess what? For all of these years, I've been hiding something.
And all of my life, I have suffered with OCD. We've had quite a few problems and challenges with regards to fertility and numerous miscarriages. So it was a real kind of significant time. Nick, it is okay for you to give work to other people. I was that person that would be, that's more important than anything else in my life.
Are leaders changing their attitude towards mental health and well-being when it comes to their own? Some of the most powerful conversations I've had on this podcast are with people who look like they've got it all together until you realise what's going on underneath. Nicky Shearer has worked in leadership, is a parent, a spin instructor, and now works on projects with Parliament, but has had her own story of change, challenge, and rebuilding her identity after burnout is one that rarely is told. I'm so grateful to have her here, so let's get into it. Nicky, thank you so much for coming on Leaders in Disguise on the couch.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling?
Yes, I'm good. Very busy at the moment, but I'm good.
Do you know, we always talk before we come on camera, do all audio checks, and you were cool as a cucumber, I think is what we'll go with. Massively prepared. Yeah, and you've done lots of radio bits and all sorts at the moment, so we're hugely privileged to have you here.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. Yeah, I've had a lot going on recently, lots of projects. I work full-time in organisation development, so I work with the railway, with East Midlands Railway, but I also have other projects that I work on as well. So I work as a champion for the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, so I do some work with them as a volunteer, and I released my first children's book at the end of last year as well, so we're doing a few interviews for that, a few book signings. So yeah, it's been a good 6 months, busy, but a good busy.
Good busy. And of course you've been away on holiday, which I've got to mention. We won't go into that for the nightmare that was going away on a sunny holiday.
It was a lovely holiday. It was a lovely holiday. The weather wasn't as kind to us that we'd have liked it to be, but it was a lovely holiday.
It's yeah, we won't get into that because we will be here all day talking about it. But it's great that you've had a really busy 6 months, like you say, and we'll dig into what those themes are, why you're involved in the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, and all the work that you're doing. Yeah. First of all, though, Nicky, I just wanted to jump in. You've been talking to me before we've come here today about some of the challenges that you've gone through. Can we start with the pregnancy? Yeah. Can we jump in there straight away? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So you've got a beautiful daughter, Jessica.
Yeah, she's just turned 7.
Crikey.
Yeah.
A good 7?
Yes. She's definitely getting a little personality of her own. She's, I say sometimes she's maybe pushing the boundaries as little ones do. But yeah, she's a lovely, sweet little girl, and I'm really proud of her. So yeah, she turned 7 a couple of weeks ago.
Fabulous. And I'm very aware that this is recorded, so she'll listen back to that. But, you know, at 7, I was an absolute nightmare. I think at 8 and 9 and 10 I was as well. So you've got all of that to look forward to.
Yeah.
I know that you are very happy to have Jessica around, but I know also it was a challenging pregnancy for you. Would you like to just start us with that?
Yeah. So before I became pregnant with Jessica, both of my parents passed away within quite a short period of time of each other, within around 18 months. So it was a real difficult time. And before we got pregnant with Jessica, we'd had quite a few problems and challenges with regards to fertility and numerous miscarriages. So it was a real kind of significant time. And yeah, a challenging time for me in my life, definitely. So then, as you can imagine, when I got pregnant with Jessica, the anxiety was already there because we'd had such a difficult time getting to that point. So yeah, the anxiety was there. There was lots of stresses of what if things go wrong, etc. And all of my life, I have suffered with OCD. which really kind of took its toll during pregnancy. So during pregnancy and when Jessica arrived, I had OCD, I had perinatal OCD. And when I was around 20 weeks, it really kind of ramped up and kicked in. Bearing in mind, I'd never told my husband about this at the time, so he didn't know that I'd suffered with OCD before. Never spoken to anyone really about it, although apart from medical nurses, doctors, etc., where I've been to talk to people, I'd spoke to one family member about it. My parents never knew about it all the way up until they passed away. Never knew. So it was a different time when I was pregnant, because not only was I having to think about me, I was having to think about somebody else as well. So the OCD changed because I was responsible for someone else, not just myself.
Can I just check in with you? So your other half, forgive me, I've forgotten his name.
Ollie.
Ollie.
Yeah.
So how long had you been with Ollie before you got pregnant?
So we'd been together, so I was pregnant 2017. So we'd been together about 4 years. But because OCD can go like this, in that period of time, there was no kind of reason really to have that conversation around it. And it's a difficult conversation to have. Like I say, I'd only told one person in my family. So it wasn't something, I suppose I was embarrassed by it because I didn't know how to express that. But when I got to the stage of 20 weeks, I thought, right, I need to talk to someone about it because it's not just about me. I'm going through a process with him and with the baby at the time. So that was probably one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had because I just didn't know how he'd take it.
And I'm going to jump in here because we talk about OCD and I feel like I need to just get the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
That phrase where people, and forgive me, and I don't know if this is triggering, so forgive me.
No.
Is that people use that phrase of, oh, I've got a bit OCD.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I like to. And I think what we mean by that is that we like things to be in a certain place, or we like the tins to be round in the certain right way in the cupboard. We're just a bit perfect, can't say that word.
Yeah.
And that's how we see it. But OCD is something that is very serious. You're the first guest to come onto the podcast talking about that.
Yeah.
What does OCD look like for you? And forgive me, then we'll get into like how it played out in terms of the pregnancy.
And I think that's why there's a real misconception about it. And I don't think it's that people don't necessarily want to know what it is. I think we're just so used to using terms like I'm a bit OCD. And it kind of is frustrating inside because you think to yourself, if you are OCD, medically diagnosed OCD, it can be absolutely debilitating. It's not just around having things in a certain way. It's the thoughts around if you didn't have things in a certain way. But OCD is intrusive thoughts. It can obviously be things around cleaning, around having awful, really not very nice thoughts, which are so beyond what is... which correlates with your morals and your values, that it makes you really uncomfortable. They almost seem real because they are so intrusive. And it can be really debilitating for some people, to the point where the mental health really struggles. And, some people can't even go out to work. They can't even go out the front door because it literally takes over every aspect of their life. I speak to parents now whose children suffer with OCD. And they said, look, I really saw it as just this thing where we like our pencils in a row or we like things in a certain way. Until I've been through it with my child, I really didn't know how serious it can be and how it can take over their life. We wouldn't say we're a bit bipolar or we've got a bit of postnatal depression. But we do say we're a bit OCD. And I think it's almost mocked sometimes as a mental health condition because of what people think. And maybe that is down to knowledge and education, I don't know. But we had this conversation before, didn't we, of how people flippantly use that term. And for people that really have it, and it can be quite severe, it can sort of trigger that, oh, if you did really have it, it could take over your life.
So you had this conversation, just taking it back then. So thank you. Well, we'll dig into this more, I'm sure, as we go through. So you sat down with Ollie, going, guess what? For all of these years, I've been hiding something. You must have, we talk about masking or leaders in disguise, and we'll talk about the work side of it after we've gone through this. But the that as a partner to live in each other's pockets and get pregnant with each other, if that's the right phrase.
Yeah.
For you to sit down and say, I need to talk you through this challenge that I'm going through. What, I think, first of all, actually, I should have asked, what triggered that conversation for you to sit down and tell him?
So for me, I think because the OCD was getting quite severe and it was taking over my everyday life. So it was taking me longer to process things in my mind. And I was getting worried about lots of things, but I was worried that worry would affect my pregnancy. So that's why I thought, right, I need to have a conversation with him. And myself and Ollie have always had a really, really open, we're very good communicators. I don't know if that's because of the job we do, I don't know, but we're very, very good at communicating. So I wasn't worried about communicating with him. It was kind of his knowledge of what I was going through and how that would land. Am I going to say it in the right way where I could get him to understand? And, you know, I have to say, it's a big statement to make, and I've probably never said this to him, but he was probably my lifesaver on that, because he even now, he still supports me with that, and he knows my triggers, he knows my behaviours. He can pull me to one side and go, Nick, are you okay? Because him and now a couple of family members know as well. Obviously more are going to know now. But a couple of family members know, and it's really hard to explain, because if it doesn't land quite right with someone, they can misinterpret what it is that you mean. So you really need to talk to someone who is a great active listener and really has that empathy and compassion and can take that on board. And he has that. And although it was a very difficult conversation, to the point where I thought, he's going to think I'm crazy. When I tell him these things, he's going to think I'm crazy. And he just really wasn't. He was absolutely unbelievable. He was unbelievable. And, you know, even now when I look back, I think that's one of the best things I've ever done in my life, was to open up to him. One of the best things I've ever done.
Because it could have gone wrong, couldn't it? I guess that's where your mind was playing it with you at that time and going, this could be it. Like, he could walk out, like something could happen. I guess chemical wise, your body's in a different place, and then you worry. Or
I think when you're in that place, you don't even think about those things. When you're in that place, you just want to get that information out. But yeah, I didn't know how he'd react. I didn't think for a second that he would go or leave, but I genuinely didn't know what the reaction would be like, because we were going through a pretty big period in our life. So to have that on top of it, because he was obviously going to become a dad again, because he's already got a little boy who's now 13. So I thought, this is such a big thing for me. And for him, I didn't know how he was going to take it. So, but you know, when people talk about mental health and they say it's really important to talk and open up, I absolutely am an advocate of that.
Do you think it's changed the dynamic of your relationship?
For the better.
For the better,
yeah, absolutely. He even says to me now, because, you know, when we first meet new people, we kind of have this impression that we want to give out, don't we, of being very confident. And I've always been quite a confident person, but I think he finds it quite endearing that I have this other side to me that I've let him in. And I think he quite likes that, because I've shown, I suppose, the authentic me, and I've been really transparent in that. And that may have never come out unless something else happened. I don't know whether that be COVID or whatever else. It may have never come out, but because that was such a significant time, and it may have been that because I went through my parents passing away, that everything had built up, and it just got to a point where it triggered it, and that was it. But yeah.
So talk us through that journey then, because I know you had a difficult time through that, and you sat down with Ollie and obviously explained what was going on. But I remember specifically you mentioned in our pre-call that you said there was a moment where you went and sought some help, where it got a little bit on top of you. Yeah.
So obviously it's brilliant to be able to talk to people, but to have the tools to be able to get you through that process, I needed to have the right person to speak to with the right tools. I had tried, before I was even with Ollie, to talk to people where what they were called at the time, counsellors, where you go and talk to people, but if you don't kind of quite get the right person that knows about your condition and they're more generic, it can be really difficult. So I did seek out a CBT therapist who I still see now. And like I say, Jessica's 7, but I still see her now. Not as often. I only see her a few times a year, but I did seek out with a CBT therapist, and those different therapies and resources and tools that she gave me kind of complemented the fact that I had Ollie to talk to and medical professionals as well, in terms of your maternity team. Excuse me. So those all complemented each other. And once I did start having those conversations, it did become a little bit easier. I'm not saying it went completely, but it did start to become easier. And I think it was almost like my little team around me of husband, CBT therapist, and my maternity team that made that process, I wouldn't say easy, but I'd say easier than what it was before. But, you know, from a maternity point of view, hence why I work with the charity, the questions that have been asked, was I asked the right questions whilst I was going through the process before, and having that link in with, do we have the right amount of mental health support for mums and families that are going through that process? All these things kind of came into question, and I think if some of the questions had been asked earlier, this may have been picked up earlier. But unfortunately, it took to be halfway through the process before I could, I suppose, get to the right tools that I needed.
An interesting point that I wanted to just raise, if I can do, is the work side. Because I'm just trying to follow this journey. So you're pregnant, you open up and unmask to Ollie. You obviously had those challenges during those, and you got that support when you needed to.
Yeah.
Did that affect? Were you on top of those by the time you got to work? Had that changed how you?
No. So I was a leader at the time, so I was leading a team, and I was a really confident leader up until I guess my mum and dad becoming really poorly, and going through pregnancy and going through fertility. I was a real confident person. I'm not saying I always got everything right, but I felt like I had that confidence in me to get me through things. When I was going through these stages, even before I became pregnant, I would probably say I could have been a bit of a nightmare, because my priorities were just all over the place. They were really ski-whiff. And although it was only kind of 10 years ago, to talk about mental health even then, there was absolutely no way I was going to open up in that working environment about what I was going through. One, because I didn't think they'd understand, and I didn't think maybe the tools and resources were there at the time. But two, I was really nervous that they would think a certain way about me. So yeah, I'd say my leadership style and my management style before I did get pregnant with Jessica, I probably could have been a bit of a nightmare. I became quite, I'd say probably obsessive with things, making sure things were done in a certain way, because I was trying to focus so much on getting myself through this period. But I think reflecting back now, that was probably a time for me to have a break. And that was probably a time for me to say, no, I need to slow down, because with everything that's happened, my behaviours and everything around what I was doing started to change. And I guess you could say I wasn't me. I'm back to my normal self now, and I'm a completely different person again. My leadership style is back to what it was. But at that particular period of time, I guess the right words to say is I wasn't what my staff needed at the time. And there were quite a few people who worked for me for a long time who were very supportive, and I still stay in contact with them now. But for people that maybe didn't know me as well, I probably wouldn't have been what they needed at the time. And I think that goes for the same for me being managed as well. I'm not sure if the tools and resources were there for me to be managed in the right way at the time, partly because maybe I didn't open up, but partly because the culture was different to what it is now. Whereas I feel right now, I know I have a great team around me, and, you know, if I ever had anything like that in the future, I think it would be dealt with a lot differently.
Do you think there's, and I'm just like seeing that dynamic and what you're talking about there, is there a benefit to opening up and talking about what you're going through, the challenges you have? Because actually, there's people that are watching, that are listening, that are thinking and relating to it in their own way. It might not be OCD. It might be something that is perinatal. absolutely is going to be something perinatal. I'm sure there's lots of different mental health challenges that come through, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But they might just be struggling with something that is going on in their lives, and opening up and talking to your peers, to the team that report into you, to your bosses. Is there a benefit to doing that?
I think for me, it was the right person. So making sure it was the right person who would want to listen for a start. Yeah. But I think it depends what you're going through, because, you know, I'll use my intrusive thoughts as an example. The thoughts are so extreme and so beyond what is classed as your values, your moral, your norm, that it's uncomfortable for even you to think about. So to have to explain that to someone else and think that they may get it is an even more difficult challenge. So I think it's what we're thinking or what's happening that we find it's difficult on how we put that across, because we automatically think that people are going to think badly of us. People are going to think badly of us. People are going to make assumptions. People read the news. People read social media. They make assumptions of what it is that you've got. When in fact, you know, I read a book the other day, a really popular book, and it was talking about OCD, and it said people that suffer with OCD, you know, there's never been any record of them ever doing anything with regards to these intrusive thoughts or having these challenges. In fact, it's so far beyond what they class as being okay, as that one of the safest people to be around. But we don't maybe see it like that because that isn't talked about. The same as you've just said, I saw OCD in a particular way. Now you might start to see it a little bit differently, or be, you know, have knowledge and be educated on it a little bit differently. For me, it's around what do they know? What do they know about what I'm suffering from? So for me, it was talking to the right people, even if that's a medical professional. It just has to be the right person, because I think people worry about how people are going to react. But for me, talking is better than not talking.
I was just thinking that word, judged.
Yeah.
Like we're worried about being judged.
Yeah.
And in our most vulnerable moments, I had this conversation with a friend the other day about that moment where you are at your less rational. So forgive me for using that, you know, outside of that world, is like just that less rational point that you are at, where you're feeling a little bit, and vulnerability is great to be able to share, of course. But when you are so uncomfortable with it, when it's a weak part of your mind, your body that you're going through, to then share that with some, I'm trying to think a polite way of describing them, but maybe those narcissistic people in our lives, it's probably the worst thing I think to be able to do. But sharing that with somebody that you respect, that you get on really well with, it's that fear, I guess, of just being judged and them thinking, oh, crikey, Nicky can't do this job anymore. I've got it all wrong. She isn't capable of doing this job.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing as well. I'm not saying we shouldn't open up if we don't feel that person, you know, we should open up to someone. But for me personally, it was having the right person. And when I talk about the team that I worked with at the time, I had some fantastic people who I probably could have opened up to, but I chose not to. But I also had some people that didn't know me as well. So, and in their defense, you know, why should they know me that well? They've not met me for very long. So I would expect that, you know, it maybe wouldn't land as well with them. But none of this for me is a reason not to talk, because yes, it's important that we have someone that will actively listen, but that doesn't have to be a family member. It doesn't have to be a friend. It doesn't have to be a work colleague. As we know, there are lots of lines that we can call. There are lots of professionals that we can call, but it has to be, I think it had to be someone for me. And I think I got to a point of desperation, to a point of, if I don't open up, I don't know what route this is going to take me down. And that was kind of a breaking point for me. So whether if I hadn't become pregnant, who knows whether that would have still come out even to this day. But for me, that was a key time.
Just moving away from that for a little bit, and just talking about the leadership roles that you've been in and what you've done. You've had some incredible, very different careers, and I know we touched at them at the start. Do you think it shaped your leadership style
100%.
With what you've gone through?
Yeah, 100%.
What type of leader would you say you are?
So, I work with leadership development now, so I actually work with leaders to work through their leadership style and how they lead teams. I am so much more empathetic. I have more compassion. I'm so much more relaxed as a person. I was quite, as a leader, I was confident, but I was quite bang, 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 bang. It needs to be done like this in a certain way. It needs to be right. So you almost was a perfectionist in a way. I liked things to be done in a certain way. And I wouldn't even say that was my OCD. I think that's just the type of person. I like things to be done right. And quite often I do a lot of things myself. I always remember one of my previous managers saying to me, Nick, it is okay for you to give work to other people. And I think it was just because, I have this style and I have this way of doing things, but I had to accept that not everybody is the same as me, the same as they had to accept that I'm not the same as them. So yeah, I'm far more relaxed now. My active listening skills, I work on that all the time, so that I'm really listening to someone rather than thinking about how to answer them. I'm really listening to what they're saying to me. I deal with lots of things around having conversations around conflict and how we can have the best outcome out of conflict. So I definitely say my leadership style is now a lot more empathetic, a lot more laid back, a lot more relaxed. And I probably say I don't let things get to me like they maybe used to. Could partly be to do with CBT and relapse plans. I don't know, but I certainly am a different person to what I was 10 years ago.
It's interesting you said CBT there, because I've gone through CBT. I talk about the superhero cape that I put on that I felt like I had when I had CBT. It was opening, it's a mind opening.
Yeah.
Is that kind of carried on with, I know that you do lots of leadership development in the work that you do. Do you feel like that's ever an area that you wanted to go down yourself to have more sort of CBT led development? So
I do a lot of work around coaching. So we're becoming more of I feel we're becoming more of a coaching culture, particularly with the organisations that I've worked with before. And it's more getting information out of people rather than telling people how to do something. For me, I class CBT therapy as quite similar. So having those uncomfortable silences where you're giving someone the opportunity to really show them themselves rather than you kind of interrupting them and taking them down a certain path with the conversation. I've found that coaching has almost been a little bit like that for me, my personal journey anyway, where I've really given people the opportunity to show me themselves. So really kind of been diverse and inclusive, and make people feel like, I guess, they have a voice. So yeah, I'd say it's kind of taken me down that path from a work perspective, and it's certainly changed me as a leader, and it's certainly changed me as a person, really.
I'm really intrigued as well to just ask you this question, because just hearing you, it's just coming to my own mind, is that when you're seeing leaders, obviously I'm sat down with leaders on this couch and we have many conversations. I'm talking to people very specifically about their mental health and well-being. Are leaders changing in your eyes? And don't say yes because you're sat here on this couch if you don't feel you need to. But are leaders changing their attitude towards mental health and well-being when it comes to their own? Or are they still very much focused on their employees?
In my experience, as I say, 10 years ago, I think it was talked about a lot less. In my experience now, whether it be the company that I work for or even other people that I've worked with, I think that leaders are trying to navigate a way of balancing that well-being and that professional side of people's lives. I think they're trying to make sure they've got the right tools and resources so that they can support their teams. Because essentially, although we want people to be well, whether that be mentally or physically, it helps everything, whether that be the business, whether it be the people themselves. Obviously, the people are more important, but it all comes hand in hand, I guess. And leaders are having to be, I think, more knowledgeable around mental health and well-being now. I'm not saying professionals, but they need to have the tools and resources to know where to guide people.
How about themselves, though? I think that's, the natural default point is always going, I know how to guide people, I know how to support them.
Absolutely.
And they're coming to me with a mental as well as physical challenge. But do they forget themselves?
Absolutely. And I said to you earlier, when I had that period of time, I wish I'd taken a break. I wish I'd taken a break because without me being well, I couldn't be well enough to lead my team properly. And, you know, we see so many things, don't we, now on social media around people being good leaders, and do you have a great leader, and they should act in certain ways and behave in certain ways. I see less around how is that leader? How is that leader? How are they coping? And I know they have a certain role to do, and that's the role that they are employed into. But they're still human beings at the end of the day. So for me, it's around a team rather than a leader and employees. For me, it's around a team. And when it comes to well-being, certainly, it's around how do we support each other. But as leaders, I think we do have to learn to take that step back and say, you know, I need that break. I need a break, or I need to have a week's holiday. I'm going to book somewhere, or I need just a week at home. We almost think we're so busy and we're multitasking with so many different things, and we have so many deadlines and projects that we're working on. I was that person that would be, that's more important than anything else in my life. And now I've definitely have a really good balance around that. So I think that, yeah, leaders, there's still a lot that are working crazy hours and are kind of not taking the time for themselves. But essentially, if we get to a period where they can't do that work anymore because they are so burnt out, what was the point in all that time? We're never going to go to our graves, are we, and say, you know, oh, I'm really pleased that I worked really hard and didn't have, a valuable life because I worked so hard. I didn't get to spend time to look after myself, and, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. That leads me on to my next question, if I may, is that asking you, with the hindsight that you now have, if you think back to when you very first became a leader, are there any mistakes that you made, any lessons that you've learned since then?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I first became a leader 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago. And when I look back on myself then, and I look back now, I think, wow, I have learned so much in that time. I've made so many mistakes over that period of time. With regards to either people management, the way I've dealt with things, possibly the rationale around things, the behaviour. Whereas now I take a step back a lot more, and I use my emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. I use resilience quite a lot, so I like to use resilience tools to bounce back from difficult situations. But I now put myself in difficult situations on purpose almost. If I know a difficult situation is coming up, I'll volunteer to go into that situation because it's great for my resilience, it's great for my well-being, as long as I'm not doing it all the time, because obviously that would lead to burnout. So I definitely do things in a different way. I'd just say I'm a lot calmer, and I take a stand back approach now of learning other people's perspectives rather than this is the way to do it. I'd say open-mindedness for me is huge. Someone who's open-minded, someone who can try and see it from other points of view. You might not always agree, but at least having the respect to do that for someone, I'm definitely on that path.
There are people, again, that are listening and watching that might be stuck, might not even realise that they are stuck in a moment. And you had a great partner, you had people around you that helped you when you were going through pregnancy, that perinatal period is the right terminology. Yep. In fact, let's start there. There were people in that period where they've got these difficult, intrusive thoughts, whatever they might be, and they're struggling to talk to people. What do they say? Where do they go? What do they do? What's your advice for people, particularly in that perinatal period? And that could be their partners, I guess, as well. It's, we use that terminology that we were pregnant. Like it could be Ollie, it could be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really tricky one. Ollie and I were actually talking about this the other week. When we were talking about people, with mental health illnesses opening up, and I used myself as the example, and I said, can you see now that my intrusive thoughts were so extreme and so vile almost? Can you understand why people don't open up? Because in their head, that's maybe they're a bad person for thinking like that. And he said, absolutely. I've totally seen it from a different point of view. And I understand that based on the extent of the things that you're thinking about, for someone off the street, for example, that they walk through the door and you start telling them these things, you know, we don't know how it's going to land. We don't know how it's going to land with that person. So my advice would be, if you are having these intrusive thoughts and they are, you know, they are something that makes you feel very uncomfortable, I personally would say to start with, if you have someone in your family who, or someone in your network, even if that's someone at work who you think, I feel I can open up to this person and I feel that they will listen to me, definitely do that, because that was a great starting point for me. But I think go to that medical professional, ring that doctor, ring that nurse. They deal with things like this all the time. You know, and they hear stories like this all the time of people that have suffered. And although we think at the time, this is horrendous, I can't share this, it's so not what I'm used to, it will be okay. It will be okay in the long run. It's just, you need to go through some steps to get to that point. But yeah, opening up was the best thing I did.
And you, sorry to jump in, I was just going to say, you talked about medical professionals. They could be the GP.
Yeah.
It could be a doctor. It might be a midwife, depending on what stage
situation they're in. Yeah. It could be, I mean, if you don't know where to go, I would say, I'm not a medical professional, but in my experience, it's been a doctor, or it's even been helplines. You know, there are lots of helplines out there that people can call. Even OCD, for example, in my case, there are specific OCD helplines that you can ring as well, which I was unaware of before. You know, there's lots of different charities that you can work with who understand your condition, because you might not even know what's wrong with you. I had an idea that I had OCD, and the day I got medically diagnosed was actually quite liberating for me, because it almost put that stamp on it to say, you were right, what you were thinking was right. But some people might not know what's happening to them. And I think that's the scary part, which is why I'd say just open up. You know, you'll be surprised how people react. You'll be surprised that they maybe won't react how you think they're going to. But I definitely think having someone who genuinely wants to listen is really important. And that's where, if you don't have someone directly in your family, friends, work, that's where your medical professionals will come in.
Let's name check some of these charities, if I may. If just thinking of, let's put them into the show notes as well, so people can go and access and reach out to those, because there are people that are going to be listening to this episode when we put it out there. We're going to be talking about perinatal, we're going to be talking about OCD. So I imagine the majority, apart from our regular listeners, hello, thank you by the way, the people that are just wanting to hear this story. Are there OCD charities? Where should people reach out to?
There's some fantastic OCD charities. You've got OCD UK, you've got OCD Action. If it is that your OCD is linked to perinatal or any mental health condition that's linked to perinatal, the Maternal Mental Health Alliance are fantastic. There's your usual of going down the route of GP, maybe midwife, or if you're under a consultant. But yeah, I found those to be really, really beneficial. And again, it was because they specialised in the area that I needed that support in. So OCD Action, OCD UK, very, very good charities. There were lots of other people like, you know, Samaritans. I've worked with the Samaritans before, where they've provided support to teams that I've worked with, where they've needed mental health support or suicide support. You know, my background, I work in rail at the moment. My background, I've worked in the police force. So obviously these topics come up quite a lot. And I've also worked in education. So it doesn't matter what industry you work in, this comes up a lot. It comes up all the time, and it certainly comes up more often than it ever has done in my experience. But yeah, Samaritans is another great one. But there are lots of people out there. There's also local groups. So, you know, you can even type into the internet now, what local groups will help me with, and show you, you know, give your symptoms and give an idea of the types of things that you're going through. And it will even come up with very local community groups that can help. Mums groups, for example, family groups, perinatal groups, community centres, mums, you know, there's lots and lots of different things. So yeah, I would, when you're in that dark place, you might not even think I'm ready to go and talk to someone, but the quicker we can, the quicker we can start implementing resources and help.
I guess it's that point of saying that you're not a bad mum, you're not a
No.
bad parent.
No.
What you're going through isn't a bad thought. It's a thought that other people might be going through.
Yeah.
That isn't exclusive to OCD. That could just be the pregnancy that you are experiencing, that you're going through.
Absolutely.
You might have had some challenge. As you've said, people might have that trauma that's happened in their lives that they might be associating it with.
Yeah.
There are parental groups out there that people can go to, and it doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It means that you probably need to just go and get a bit of support.
Yep.
To just, and I hate to use this word in this scenario, but it feels appropriate in so many ways, is to normalize those conversations, to go, what you are going through is normal, to not invalidate anyone's feelings, that they are normal because of somebody else is having that thought.
Absolutely. And in your head, you think, I've thought this thought myself many times of, I would love to be normal sometimes when I first started going through this process. But now, you know what? I actually think this makes me different. And if anything, I think it just makes us special in the way that we all deal with things in different ways. We all have different experiences, and I think that's a good thing. But no, it absolutely doesn't reflect on parenting or how good a parent someone is. If anything, you're going through this, you feel like this because you don't want to be in this situation. You're a good person. You don't want to feel like this and to be going through this situation. You want to feel, I don't really like to use the word normal, but you want to feel like you can have the same experience as other parents and as other people. So yeah, absolutely. It's just, we're all just different. We're all just different. We're all just diverse.
What is normal?
Yeah, exactly.
It is. We maybe need to just ban that word in the world, because even
I don't think there is normal.
No, there isn't normal.
Yeah.
You're right. We are all uniquely so different, and we have to celebrate that and not. I think what we very quickly realise is that there isn't really any normal majority of people out there. The majority might be very much like us. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the book. What's the book about? It's exciting. I was really impressed.
My first children's book came out November last year. It's called Up There in the Sky. So it's aimed at kind of 2 to 6-year-olds, I would say. And it's all around a little girl who uses her imagination. So when it comes to bedtime, it's thinking about what goes on outside that window, what goes on up there in the sky, using her imagination to take her through different scenarios and to help her to eventually fall asleep. I'm a big believer in imaginations, because I think whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, it's something that we have control over. So it's something that we can make up these scenarios ourselves. And I love seeing that in children because they do it all the time. Yeah. So it's called Up There in the Sky. It came out the end of last year. I've had some brilliant book signings. I've been out to different schools. I've been out to libraries. Recently did an interview on the radio. I've had great feedback from the book. I'm currently in the process of actually writing my first adult book. So looking at things like mental health and how that affects us through the journey of maternity and that perinatal period. So currently working on that at the moment. We'll see where that takes me.
Brilliant. So are you on as Nicky Shearer or Nicholas Shearer on LinkedIn?
I think, yes, I'm on as Nicky Shearer.
Yeah.
Nicky Shearer on LinkedIn.
So Nicki.
Nicky.
Why? Apologies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can find me on there and link it in with me. And if there's any support with regards to things that we've talked about with regards to the OCD or, help with the mental health side of things, reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to talk to people.
Thank you. Well, keep telling your story. Keep writing stories. And, of course, if you want to come and sit on this couch and tell your story, and perhaps you've written a book, then drop us a message. So hello@leadersindisguise.com. You can message me, Gary Parsons UK, or Leaders Disguise. And hopefully we can see your next. Come and talk to us when you've got your next book, and I'd be really interested in seeing that and the work that you do. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.